the Forbes Funds. We've been hosting these since March of 2020 in an effort to provide nonprofits with resources and updates, as well as an opportunity to compare stories with each other in terms of emergent opportunities, as well as challenges and barriers to doing the work well. Since March of 2020, we've had 5,027 calls with 42,685 participants, mostly thanks to the individuals like you who join us each Monday on these calls and in other call-ins like the Sustainable Developers Roundtable, various cohorts, and GPNP convenings in the past few years. So thank you for your time and attention this morning. As a quick shout out before we get started, I am going to ask that you come off camera as much as possible, just as a way of ensuring engagement and making sure that, we're really giving the attention and respect to the presenters during these calls as much as possible. Can you see my screen okay, just before I jump in? I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay. Perfect. So this is our first call for community solutions of the year. And as you know, we have the Sustainable Development Goals and the social determinants of health as our frameworks for these conversations, mostly to get individuals as comfortable as possible with utilizing the same language and common goals and objectives so we can find as many bridges to be built across this work as possible. For anybody who knows or attended the summit last year, you've already heard a little bit from Adam and the new era of welcoming AI into the nonprofit space, but just making sure that we're also putting that in the context of the work you're already doing as a boon to that work, not as something that's going to compete for nonprofit jobs or anything like that, as a way to incentivize and elevate, the work that's already happening with education, access and quality, healthcare and quality, neighborhood and built environment, social and community context, and economic stability. We're really excited to have Adam join us this morning because one, it's been many months that Fred, Olivia, and Hannah and I have been really working with him and his team to build up Skilly as a way to kind of augment and answer questions about the Forbes funds in a way that's iterative and that can help us better meet folks' needs in terms of understanding the work that we do, but also to create a space to level set expectations. As you know, we're very iterative in our work, and there's a lot that's happening at any given time. And so keeping up with all of the different, areas of work, Skilly has been an incredible tool for me with GPNP. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to AI and the work that really is applicable to the nonprofit sector. So I'm going to pause there, and Fred's going to be joining at the end of the call. Adam, I can turn it over to you to jump into the presentation. And thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Okay, wonderful. Well, happy New Year. I think I at least get like a handful of hours or days until I have to officially stop saying that. So for those that are joining in, I am bringing all the New Year joy to everybody here and moving us out of the winter haze into all the fun stuff that's along the way. So thanks everybody for joining early-ish on a Monday, but probably feels particularly early given the time of year it is. Really welcoming and nice to see so many familiar faces. So thanks everybody for those that I've intersected with an email or GPNP or along the journey that have been kind enough to share, what their subject matter expertise is along the way. I'm hoping to return just a small bit of that favor that everyone here has been so graceful to allow me to receive. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, at the risk of kind of saying all the tropes. I really do want you to stop me mid-go on this. We're going to be covering two really kind of big and exciting areas that the Forbes Funds and GPNP have really been pushing for the social impact sector. So the first one is going to be really about what is AI doing as we start to design or research or shape using methods that we've been using probably for decades, like how to build a stakeholder map, but sort of what are the influences of AI there? What are some of these new technologies coming to be? Is there an advantage or an opportunity for us to apply some of this, or should we wait a little bit longer and it's actually just kind of a shiny distraction? We'll kind of set the baseline for there for 10 or 15 minutes. And then we're actually going to shift, just as Emily and her colleagues have mentioned, into kind of what is the direct implications of hiring AI. So instead of thinking of it as purely a augmented or kind of an assisted realm where it's an extension or tools to kind of give us, kind of better shovels to kind of dig our trenches with, what it's really all about is how do we hire and kind of what do we assign the jobs to be done to artificial intelligence? And then how do we make sure that we hold all the humanity, because that's what we are, right? But things like AI or machine learning, other kinds of technologies that come to be, help us bring a little bit more kind of dignity back to the work, right? We know that there is not enough hours in the day, and we're all going to try to navigate that together. So unless anybody has any kind of off the cuff questions, I was going to go ahead and roll in. Okay, wonderful. Thumbs up, smiles on. I see a couple people have crawled their way into the video. So thanks for those that are joining me live. And I'll send all my good vibes of courage and functioning extroversion here to everybody else who's still behind the way. Please do be active in the chat if you're not going to be active on the camera. Okay, let's go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my browser. It'll get full screen. And if I could just get a thumbs up maybe from Emily or Liv that this is looking great on your side, we'll officially begin. All right, wonderful. Okay, I'm Adam Paulisick. If for those that don't know me, I am a professor longstanding here at Carnegie Mellon for a little over 10 years. I largely now teach in the School of Computer Science around artificial intelligence and entrepreneurship, but have spent a long career as well working in human-computer interaction and design thinking. When I'm not obviously on the university campus, I'm still an entrepreneur myself. So actually the software that we'll be talking about today is something that rolled out of about 5 years of research in one of my labs called Skill Builder. Previous to that, we'll be talking about an initiative that really Emily and Liv and Fred and others from the Forbes Fund, including Hannah and Bree, really leaned in with me to sort of bring and make zero cost for everyone here today around shaping and kind of taming the complexity of what we're all staring at. But I always joke that this is the simplest job description that I try to put forward in all the organizations I do, which is really around being Kermit. And the headspace for this, although I'm sure there's room for improvement in any way we shape or define, a leader, is really about kind of letting go all of those constraints and all the kind of problems of 2023 and kind of past, and really kind of walking into this next 20 or 30 minutes with an open mind. Because while there is no absolute perfect way to implement any new technology for existing organizational work, there's always ways to explore and experiment. And so I'm hoping that you can be this Kermit with me and sort of show sort of the flexibility and the experimentation to sort of welcome some of these new things and decide what's right for you and your organization. If you are less familiar with design thinking, I know this has been around for some time. I know that many people have taken great trainings at places like Luma or Maya, where I have some roots, as well as lots of other good resources online. But design thinking is all around bringing shape to the world and taming complexity of problems that present themselves when you don't have necessarily otherwise the tools to kind of bring shape or structure to those problems. What's cool about these methods that largely cast themselves as kind of neighborhood research or user research or staff research really have a number of ways to be described, but 4 major elements that you should be thinking about constantly is the amount of kind of empathy that you can draw out and make connections with some of these tools, right? Kind of living the problem as opposed to sort of sympathizing with the problem. We're going to notice that tools like design thinking are inclusive in nature because by definition, they involve multi and interdisciplinary teams. It's actually part of the standard of doing the research is that you involve in the nonprofit and social impact sector, those that are experiencing, whether it's temporary or long-term kind of transition or impactful moments that they need support and encouragement from. It's the staff, it's the consultants, it's a variety of other folks that are in the mix across the entire ecosystem, right? The nice thing about design thinking as well is it can be applied when you are starting a nonprofit, when you're reinventing a nonprofit, when you are changing over your board, when you are in a complete, kind of healthy place for funding, when you're kind of stressing out and seeing your roadmap and your timeline maybe be a little shorter that you want. And more than anything else, and this is really the important one, is it allows us to be resilient and receptive to change, right? And that's the kind of ambitious, aspirational, kind of ultimately inspiring tone that we want these different tools to have. And if you happen to be a design nerd like I am, and you really want to go deep on this presentation will be available to everybody who's on the call and beyond. And Emily and Olivia and Bree and others will make sure you can see this. And the link in the bottom right-hand side that says Sierra Design reading list is a list of about 15 or 20 books that I recommend that if you do happen to have, a free hour or two that you want to choose advancing your design thinking knowledge. These are pretty cool resources to kind of get your head around. So the last kind of point that I would kind of make here to kind of prime for the cohort, because there's some of you that are saying, okay, this sounds kind of interesting, or maybe I've done some of this, or yeah, I'm seeing a problem in my space that I need to adopt to, but I'm not really someone who does research or does design. I want to share a little bit of a story about how I came to realize that I am a designer 10 years ago, because I refused to call myself that before about a decade ago. And the way that I did that is I thought about all the different problems and opportunities I experienced in a day, and I thought about which ones I iterate. So in the kind of trinity of design thinking standards, there's three really core principles in the kind of international standard, at least. One is that it's interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And so if I took an example like making lunch for my kids, I have a variety of very spicy stakeholders, right? I have a 6 and a 10-year-old. They have big feelings about lots of things, but one of which is what they put in their bodies for daily lunch. But I had to involve them in the process of designing their lunch. Otherwise, I'm going to end up, zigging when they zag. I also probably need to involve other important humans like my partner or my wife. Ashley could be, inherently a nutritionist or a doctor along the way. If we found out things like, for instance, my son has a lactose allergy and he needs ultimately some adjustments. But the idea here is every day, everyone on this call designs products, problems, processes, experiences, and services, right, that ultimately make the world better. And we do that by, observing what the daily habits are, getting inspiration from others that are like us. Perhaps, the parenting example resonates with you. If not, it's those that are thinking about housing or hunger insecurity, education, or a variety of other important societal issues that many of you on the phone are helping to transform. We then build prototypes and experiments, and then we have to continuously adapt. And I want to draw your attention to these last two bullet points, because this is really where we've seen a little bit of an evolution, especially recently. And that's because if you have existed in any type of way or shape connected to the internet, you probably have realized that you're starting to see some pictures that just frankly don't make sense. Right now, ironically, I'm sure there's someone who's much smarter than me, a zoologist on the planet, that could point out where there are penguins that do happen to have desert or dry land. So forgive me if I have, missed a little bit on my deep kind of science roots. But the idea is, on average, we probably are not used to seeing a penguin, let alone a large group of penguins running around the desert. And we know that law of averages, we're going to see more and more of this. And we're going to have more and more control to create by simply typing words. And all of this is because there's this wild and wonderful trend out there as a subsection of the broader category of artificial intelligence called generative AI. Now, I will tell you that there are lots of ways to think about generative AI, but the short version here is that it's really about predicting generatively what the next something might be. And so you're probably familiar with things like ChatGPT. Sometimes the kind of half nerds in us, I'll call those large language models. The premise here is that generative AI allows you to use the sum of all of the crowdsourced kind of knowledge and data with some really kind of complex technology made easy-ish for the first time in order to prescribe what you want this digital capability to actually do. And in fact, what's really cool about things like generative AI is that you can actually use generative AI to do things like build slides and define generative AI. So this is coincidentally one of the many tools that we're going to be talking about in our various kind of cohorts and engagements with GPNP and Forbes around kind of how to embrace and make tangible generative AI. So this is an example of beautiful.ai, which is a real tool that you can go to today and very quickly put in a prompt. In this case, I made a funny kind of very meta statement around a slide to define generative AI, which therefore defined generative AI, right? In and around the idea of creating new and interesting, what we're aware of in forms of text or images or videos, and the world is sort of just beginning to evolve in this way. So we've kind of thought a lot about design thinking. I think some of you have already gotten experience there. If not, there's some really great foundational resources that GPNP and the Forbes Funds have just to kind of get some basic exposure. But what we are going to be pushing on this year is really the combination of strategic design and AI. And what that means is we're going to have to take methods, and it's okay, perfectly fine that if you have not heard of this, because not everybody has had to endure storyboards upon storyboards like those of us had in the university or kind of private sector have. But we're going to be taking a lot of methods like storyboarding that looks exactly what you would imagine it to be and is available for free in the open kind of Creative Commons, and really kind of putting some shape to that and enriching it with kind of AI capability. So if you want just a small example of just one kind of template or method, right, that can be used today, the Forbes Funds and GPNP have already made the basic templates of storyboards or stakeholder maps, or if these words don't mean anything, I assure you they will if you take I'll look at this QR code or follow up with Emily, Bree, or Olivia or others on the team to kind of bring this together. And begun to kind of take us from what we think of as kind of the first version or the baseline version of how to make sense of an experience and things like a storyboard, and really kind of start to introduce this modern technology in our cohort. So step one, as part of this cohort, is to come in and understand about 20 to 25 kind of basic methods that help us solve problems. Okay. In addition to that, we'll find ourselves in a place where we'll then take those methods and work with our teams to create a baseline. This is obviously a funny and silly example about a restaurant customer using a new curbside app to go and order pizza, just as a literal example. And then as we evolve through the cohort, we'll begin to introduce a variety of AI or generative AI specifically tools. And you can see on my right-hand side here, I've given just a couple of examples of Adobe's Firefly, which is image generation, Murph, which we'll hear a little bit more about, which is audio AI, as well as ChatGPT that some may already be familiar with, if not using. And then this is inherently based for those that decide to be very immersed in the kind of digital spectrum and ecosystem, Miro, which is the digital whiteboard version of this. However, it's important to note that we actually also have printable PDFs for every one of the exercises that we're talking about in the cohort. So we realize, one, that internet signal doesn't always find its way into all the places we want to do design thinking. And two, that it may not meet your organization where you are today to immediately onboard into a tool like Miro or one of the other digital whiteboards. It might be helpful just to have good old-fashioned pens, papers, markers, and Post-it notes to kind of augment your experience. As part of this cohort, we'll be digging in block by block on these methods. And so we might start by asking ourselves, hey, what's the implication of using generative AI, or in this case, Adobe's Firefly, to humanize or contextualize a storyboard? And so in this case, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, I have a prompt. A prompt is just a glorified way of saying a message that I'm typing to the AI. It would be the same as texting a colleague or writing an email to a friend. You should think of it in that same metaphor, because inherently AI is just simply alternative intelligence to those that have a biological heartbeat. And so I want to prompt my digital colleague, in this case AI, to say, hey, there's a customer on their mobile phone that's getting ready to pick up an order, and they're really, really hungry, but they don't have necessarily their food yet. And, as we can see here, the AI is going to sometimes get that really right, and sometimes the AI is going to need a little bit more coaching along the way. What's important about this, though, is that I can take then a subset, as you'll notice up here on my AI, and you can actually take that character and you can drop them in the first slot. And of course, I have tremendously bad artistic skills, so this inherently means that my characters are going to be drag and dropped in awkward squares and circles, but certainly everybody now gets the idea who my character is. The next thing I'm going to think about is, how can I enrich other aspects of this story that might help me better serve the community or individual or group of individuals or whatever the shape of my impact is, around, kind of this idea. And so what's really interesting about this is that all of these different characters can come to life in new ways. So obviously we didn't have a concept of audio unless the people in the room in historical design sessions were willing to either record or document their voice or sort of do improv or act the parts out along the way. And so if I go ahead and I shift my sharing over to Murph, and this is, hopefully everyone can see my Murph AI slot now. Thumbs up. Wonderful. Okay, so what Murph does is allow us to take any words that we have here, including my opening slide about pizza, and characterize them in audio.
Wow, I am hungry. I really want pizza.
Now, what's important about that is AI also allows you to change any of those characters. So we started with Katie, who's a female. Maybe we want to go to Edward now and understand, after a little bit of rendering, how he might feel hunger or express hunger.
Wow, I am hungry. I really want pizza.
Now, obviously, not everyone has to have a fancy pants over the ocean accent in order to kind of make all of this so. But what's cool about this is not only can we now have kind of audio components that are driving and creating incredibly interesting scenarios and experiences in our storyboard, but we can also manipulate that language and those words. And we can now ask people to sort of represent with their literal voice, culture, and tone how they might engage in, let's say, an ordering experience or buying a home or getting their kids to school or taking the bus. And that's not the least of it, because inherently there's those that are differently able that may not depend as much on vision and might require an audio delivery of our story. And so it's just another example about how AI can begin to augment the design thinking process and the journey to meet everyone and anyone kind of where and how you are, including things like, kind of bi, tri, or kind of multilingual dynamics, those that are differently abled or are vision impaired in a variety of ways that we can bring together. So this is just a couple of ways that we can use both kind of image generation and audio to bring it together, but that's not where the infusion of AI will stop in the cohort. The other element we're going to have to think about is a lot of these scenarios require levels of detail and nuance about a particular moment in time or moment of truth that are otherwise really, really hard to capture. So for instance, like I have never owned a pizza shop, although I would love to, because I think that pizza is distinctly my low-key religion here. So I should know more than I know about pizza. But the reality is that I don't. So I had to use my OpenAI subscription, which is the makers of ChatGPT, to go in. And as you can see here, I'm going to give it a really simple prompt. Now, reminder with AI or alternative intelligence is you have to kind of prompt who the person needs to be, because the AI can be the sum of everything it learned. In the case of OpenAI or ChatGPT, I need to say, hey, you're a pizza shop owner. Now, I wouldn't try to put in that you're a Pittsburgh pizza shop owner, because we know that will be its own type of kind of religious war about who has the best pizza and what kind of pizza special should be. But the idea is you can add more and more characters to this. If you wanted more vegan pizza options and referencing of the kind of Altavia kind of mobile mafia, you might go that way. If you wanted more pizza options that were more everyday or generic franchise kind of national brand, you might say you're the owner of a Pizza Hut. Regardless of that, you can see here that OpenAI now gives me back very specific references on what and how the specials of this particular pizza shop might go, and it would allow me to further enrich my storyboard. Now, all of this stuff can come together in a timed experience. And again, we can always start in the cohort model with the analog or the base PDF. We can evolve very quickly into kind of these hybrid kind of digital meets kind of AI tools, or we can completely immerse ourselves in virtual whiteboards like Miro and then really integrate images and videos in a compelling way. So I just wanted to highlight for everyone's benefit, these are the types of ways we're going to be not only introducing or sort of welcoming everyone to the design thinking or the humanity-centered design movement that we are pushing here at the Forbes Funds and GPNP, but we're also going to be showing everyone low cost and free tools that they can use to further recognize the unique and differentiated circumstances of the incredibly impactful populations they serve. So let me go ahead and just take a quick breather there along this way, because I know that Emily wanted to run a small poll, but I also wanted to highlight that Forbes Funds has made the nearly 1,000 hours of broader templates and about 30 hours of high production lecture free to anyone who will come and sign out their form or will fill out Emily's poll now, because I realize that some of you may be blocked via firewall or otherwise from getting to the core form that's here. But if you do fill out the form or recognize the poll or find Emily, Bree, Olivia, or others from Forbes Fund and GPNP, they will certainly illuminate for you how to find this code to make it free. I don't know if anybody had any questions from the chat. I can't imagine we made it through all of that without everybody asking about like data, privacy, security, control, transparency. I'm sure those are riddled in there. Emily, did I get it about right?
Yeah, a couple of those. So the one that came through that I want to start with is from John Ingram. And he asks, is there transparency in how AI can make those decisions? Can it be audited or unintended biases, especially those that might affect confidentiality? So data sovereignty.
Well said. So I like the nice small question for everybody, really not weighted at all. So couple of things. So it obviously depends quite a bit based on the service. So what's important to realize is that AI is the category, and I know that those that ask the question kind of know this, but AI is the big category. Inside of AI are concepts like machine learning and Data science is certainly like a tangential cousin to sort of all these pieces. So today, each model or each company has a slightly different kind of point of view. So let's take some of the more open models, large language models like ChatGPT or Hugging Face or Claude. A lot of their policies are still pretty opaque. So you sort of put the data in, it kind of does a thing, it gives you a response. And that's why there's really, really exciting kind of rapid growth with the adoption of these kind of large language models or kind of tooling for the consumer mindset. It's also why it gives everybody, and rightfully so, this question a little bit of heartache, because you sort of have these kind of messages kind of going in, they get a response back, and you're not 100% sure exactly what happened. When you look at local companies, just to highlight a couple of interesting brands around town, there's a company called BlastPoint that does a tremendous amount of AI and machine learning on selecting households on behalf of energy and utility companies that match with government subsidy servicer programs rightfully earned. And so the inherent interesting thing about that AI and machine learning is it is 100% auditable and transparent, meaning they can't make a recommendation to a utility organization like Duquesne Light or Light without being able to say, this is why we thought this person would qualify for this program. And the reason for that is because in the case of the energy and utility use case, sensitive information like household income is not actually available, so it needs to be modeled. And all models carry bias, but certain models inherently have much more bias because of the way they were trained with historical data. What you're going to want to look for, and actually there's a 14-minute video that we made everybody suffer through at some point or another, which is in the appendix to the slide, and I'll flip by it. There's a really important pattern for sort of what defines auditable and transparent AI. And that's what you generally need to have an intermediary between your data and the generalist large language models. And so one important, what they call architectural pattern, or a pattern to understand how to protect those most vulnerable, as the stewards of delivering services to those underutilized populations, is recognizing that you should be using technology that looks at the types of questions that you're getting and the types of data you have, but only submits and only interacts with these really big kind of open AI or kind of Hugging Face kind of models with the least amount of information that's representative of the types of data or questions that you're getting. You shouldn't necessarily be submitting directly to these large language models or big models all of your information and hoping that they do the right thing, because we know that despite many of these organizations being intending good actors, we also know the kind of forces of capitalism and sort of what that does, right? And we know that if we look at companies as large as like the Microsofts or the Googles or the Facebooks, there's some incredible breakthrough moments we've had as society because of them. And I think there's also some really important moments we need to scrutinize for what's going on. Emily, were there other questions before I keep on rolling?
There were. The other one that was really interesting, actually, right before that one, sorry to the other John, I went out a little bit out of order. So is there information that's provided by AI that's peer reviewed? So John Turak asked this question, and there's a link to a peer review evaluating resources kind of question within the question.
Yeah, so I haven't read the article, but let's talk a little bit about the ways that we improve the AI. And I want to, John, I'm happy to come back when I have a chance to actually look at the article when it's not so real time. But there's two ways we do it. So one is that there's a human led feedback loop, not human in the loop, meaning basically in the types of AI that we are developing at the Forbes Funds and GPNP, it's the humans that set the tone on the types of questions, the root cause, the style, depth, and richness of the answer that then informs their digital colleagues, which we're largely simplifying as artificial intelligence, but then has the ability to present back to them information that has a whole bunch of signals that the staff at, let's say, GPNP and Forbes can ultimately, kind of contribute. That's in terms of like some really kind of mechanical pieces like thumbs up or thumbs down, but it also observes in, how frequently the answers or questions, that they're working on get adjusted, how frequently the documents are uploaded, and the kind of knowledge transfer that happens. And so that's kind of one kind of feedback dynamic. The other one is something called adversarial machine learning. And there's some really kind of bad actor connotations to that definition where people are trying to use machine learning to kind of corrupt the broader category of AI. But a sort of more PG version of it, John, is that, we're using other models to score models. And so I'll give you kind of two examples of the ways you sort of reinforce the effectiveness of the AI in kind of a moral lens. And one is that you don't allow the same model to constantly receive the same requests. So if I continuously feed, let's say, OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, or Hugging Face, or Claude, which is Anthropic, or a variety of these others, the same questions or a series of questions in a row, the AI is quite smart and it will fill in the gaps between those points, right? So one of the challenges we have in order to kind of defend against the bias and the oversimplification and the hallucination of any one model is to vary the model so the models don't get conditioned and lazy, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, about how they would respond. The other dimension is something in part of a category called machine learning ops, or ML ops. And what that means is when we get an answer back, we actually score that answer from model one with a variety of other models by either asking the same question or a challenging question or a variety of other ways to kind of improve upon those answers. So those are the two ways that we have kind of feedback and iterative improvement. And that's, kind of above and beyond the kind of traditional kind of privacy, kind of safety, kind of information security dynamics that everybody has to be accountable to as we store any information, whether it's Google Docs or really personalized perspectives.
As you can imagine, we've had 3 questions come in since then. Do you want me to kind of keep throwing those at you, or do you want to go into the rest of the presentation? We can circle back.
No, I can certainly, I think I can cover these a little bit at light speed, but, I would just encourage John and Jane, I'm happy to talk in like more prescriptive data. So basically, so John's question is, how does AI provide attribution to sources? Well, this is an evolving question. So where AI mostly is today is it will tell you what it referenced. The problem you're going to find, and I don't want to speak for John because I don't know if this is what he was intending, but basically the problem you're going to find is like binary, like visibility to what sources were considered, kind of a settled law problem, right? We can present back, as do the responses that we have in our AI kind of turned on, like what it looked at. And the reason why we did that in the beginning is because if something was out of date or a number from an annual report or a grant funding report or a RFP had evolved, right? We wanted to understand where the document was that was uploaded a year ago or 6 months ago that is out of date and either exclude that or diminish it, which is a whole another kind of pathway of conversation we need to have about AI, because you need to kind of, just like you train a human, you have to train the knowledge in and out of AI. So that's where we are today. The part that gets a little bit messier is attribution for generative AI, meaning the language that it has is based on something called a parameter. Parameters are all or part of a word, to oversimplify it a little bit. And what it predicts next is oftentimes what's called a perplexity scale. And, good old fashioned kind of data science, kind of math and stat will kind of get you one score, kind of AI will get you another, but human beings are actually better than AI still at kind of predicting what's coming next. And the reason why we're better is because we're constantly taking real-time and near-time feedback and thinking about patterns and can consider, kind of complexity of like the situation and the EQ or emotional intelligence of the room. And those are things that are not yet fully baked yet, or are still kind of fluid mechanical levers and not necessarily there. So attribution, as far as what was included or referenced, is certainly considered. What percentage it was used or informed is still a little bit what we call gray box, meaning even those of us that are building and authoring don't have absolutely precise knobs to turn. We only have kind of big levers to kind of influence via the prompt strategy about what to expose or not expose, or how to weight certain documents or not. This is a question that John didn't ask, but I want to just say it, which is like, there's a big misconception that a lot of the advantage in AI and ML is like how big the generalist model is, but all models are getting big enough to far beyond supersede like generalist knowledge of an individual human. A lot of what it's coming down to is like how you load the recency of the data. So attribution is one really important critical tone, but actually the chronological weight of the attribution is actually turning out to be much more of an issue when it comes to social impact and kind of nonprofit messaging, because what can you do for me a year ago outside of the kind of funder kind of philanthropy community is really not the types of questions we're seeing getting asked in social impact org. It's more like, how can you help me today? How can I get in this program? Where can I attend or sign up to volunteer tomorrow? Not what did you do over the last 10 years, even though it feels like that would be a really rich data set. And then the last thing here, I just want to kind of touch on Jane's point. How would this data processing be able to help produce a marketing feasibility study? for the arts. Jane, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by a marketing feasibility study, just so I don't tune my response here, and I'll buy myself 30 seconds maybe while you do that if you're still kind of with me, just because I want to make sure that I don't use the kind of wrong word. So that comes in, kind of along the way, but hopefully we'll be able to get to that question as we kind of roll into the AI. Any other burning questions, Emily, that you wanted to make sure we are going to cover? Otherwise, this will be available, this presentation and this recording, to everybody along the way.
Yeah, that sounds good. Please proceed. And then anything else that comes through, I'll circle back to at the end of the call.
Wonderful. Okay, Jane, sorry that I didn't totally nail your question, but if you can give me a quick reframe, then I'll happily get to it here before we wrap up at the end. Okay, so let's go ahead and shift gears and let's think about what we're also doing on top of this AI or advanced technology cohort, right? So this is something that, Olivia and I have been talking with Fred for kind of years about this kind of important kind of moment in time and how social impact and generative AI needs to be kind of a leading force in social impact as opposed to a lagging force, right? So if we look at things like CRM, customer relationship management, which I think most are at least familiar with, and sometimes we call it Salesforce.com or Pipedrive or a variety of other things like Zoho or whatnot. But that was sort of a really, really important element to the nonprofit social impact sector, but it wasn't necessarily purpose built for the social impact nonprofit sector to keep track of donors or potentially volunteers for a lot longer time than it was for kind of sales and marketing people. And so we want to make sure that we don't get left behind on this really important trend, because it's probably the best example of high impact, low dollar trade-offs, not to make light of the really important questions that those like John and Jane and others are asking in and around the idea of like, how do we actually use this and what's the privacy constraints? But what it's all based on, and the kind of transition bridge between the design thinking cohort and generative AI, is that oftentimes it comes down to questions, right? Questions are really big and complex, and sometimes we have to solve them using methods like a stakeholder map to figure out who are we really serving, or a storyboard to really figure out how can we most impactfully serve them. And we've already talked a little bit about how we can layer AI on top of that. But the real reality here is that we are not always lucky to have 5 or 10 questions that we get asked. In fact, more often than not, we are traversing hundreds of questions at any given moment from volunteers, staff, potential donors, small and large foundations, and other forces that happen around the social impact sector. And so about 5 years ago, I started researching out of Carnegie Mellon the idea of what these 7 major types of questions could influence, and could we actually get artificial intelligence to lead and be AI first about receiving questions from primarily donors, volunteers, staff, and funders in the social impact sector. Questions that are kind of yes or no, like before you get a big grant, like, hey, have you actually done this before? Questions that are really open, like, hey, what do you think is the real root cause of our housing crisis? Easy ones like that, like I was tossed as well. Probing questions or challenge-oriented questions that are really trying to get at the root of how you're going to get something or how you're going to do there. And of course, telegraphing, leading, and a variety of other questions, all the way down to our favorite passive aggressive question where we get, which is rhetorical, which is really all about, a statement in question form. So we started kind of thinking about all these questions when we were designing this advanced cohort. And really what it came down to, and this is going to sound a little simplified, is that we just wanted to make sure that the humans and the artificial intelligence could answer any question in the highest confidence, meaning they were sure that information was accurate, and the highest differentiation, meaning the value of that information that they got or the value of that program or service was above and beyond anything else they could have received from someone else, differentiated from similar or comparative or competitive even products or services or product service systems. So we started really trying to dig in on these 2 big concepts. And that's when we started to welcome, this idea of building AI colleagues with the Forbes Funds and GPNP. And as some of you will joke and saw my presentation at GPNP, we lovingly call them our overlords, even though they are not. And in fact, the anecdote that I shared with those that are willing to tolerate me live, as those that sit around with me here at Carnegie Mellon, is that actually, like, we can't even get robots to open up doors on a regular basis yet. So while I'm sure that artificial intelligence and robots will present an existential crisis someday, we are a long, long time away from them kind of capturing what's happening along this journey. And in fact, we don't stand alone, right? The reality of it is that most people, right, have similar or more trust in products or service that are using degrees of artificial intelligence and machine learning, in and around the idea. So while there are some insecurities that all of us feel around our professional achievement and the ability to kind of manage and culture and do all kinds of other things, it turns out that people on the receiving end are more than average in favor of the trend that's happening. And we can imagine that is going to become more and more popular as popularity itself becomes, easier life-saving kind of capabilities. But it is really scary. The problem I have, and the thing we have to kind of own together, though, is like, as much as it is scary, there's just not enough hours in the day. Myself and Kit, who's my co-founder, is on the line today, and John Pastor, who's our other co-founder, did this in sort of the last act of our lives because we realized that this is the sector that touches everyone. It's a massive employer. It's a top 5 employer in the country, let alone the region. It's a massive GDP consumer. It is the extension, if not the alternative, if not the default, to lifting up and empowering some of our most, kind of vulnerable populations and communities, let alone inspiring and amplifying the incredible work that's happening in underutilized communities as well. So we sort of have to weigh this pendulum swing right now and realize that, yes, it can feel really overwhelming because you have a lot of whiz-bang internet stuff happening for those of us that are turning more and more into Luddites and want to use the internet less. That is certainly a challenging feeling. And at the same time, I can't ask my volunteers, my underpaid staff to do more with less unless I'm really going to invest in something that's more than an extension of their arms and legs. And that's really important to consider, right? Because at the end of the day, cost, which is not just monetary, it's opportunity cost, it's effectiveness of delivery, it's impact of AI should only be celebrated if it's actually less expensive, meaning more taxable or more efficient than doing it manually. Like, we shouldn't rush to just do AI for AI's sake. We should do AI because we want AI to be the turning point in what makes our staff members that don't have trust funds or don't have an unfair advantage stick around, right? It's the thing that actually makes it possible to deliver 2 or 3 times the impact. It's the ability to actually receive and be open to receiving, gifts of resources or time or money after hours or on vacation, because all of our hardworking human colleagues just cannot simply exist 24/7, 365 and speak all the languages and know all the things. And so we have to kind of recognize that there are some use cases in our case, like inbound conversations and dialogues, that are really important. And we also recognize that there's lots of things like sitting on site at a school and having an important conversation with a young adult that we will never, at least in the near term, want to introduce AI as the process to do. So I think it's important to hold that tension. And as someone who is an aspiring Luddite, but also a professor of AI, has to be in the middle of what I think about. As someone who wants my kids to be empowered, inspired, and use technology in a thoughtful and ethical and moral way, and at the same time, right, not force them to do more with less. And that's an important thing. And so what I want to kind of help you understand is that this is a collaboration between the humans, and by definition, our humanity, and what we are willing to share of that kind of humanity and that human experience with our AI colleagues as an form to enhance their alternative intelligence. But it's a pendulum swing. So the idea is the AI assists the humans assist the AI. It's not a one way or all or nothing kind of dynamic. In fact, the AI can never be truly impactful and kind of live the vision with the right tone and effectiveness unless the humans are involved. And I don't know about you, but as a human being, I don't have 5 or 10 more hours a week to just do more stuff. And I'm not really that excited about my employer just giving me more software tools that don't actually take away work and just give me, quote unquote, more efficient ways to kind of do the work I'm doing. Because at some point, you will then run out of another max. And if you think your employees are mad and resentful now, right, imagine what happens when you give them automation and tools and then they go another 30 or 40%. And then the smallest thing breaks, or they have a major life event, or the culture changes, or your org restructures. And now you have half the people doing twice the work, but it requires the people to pull all the levers. And we haven't properly introduced alternative intelligence and our AI colleagues to actually pick up the load that our human colleagues don't need to do. The net on all of this is make space for the humans to focus on the humanity of delivering the impact of the mission, right? Allow the AI to support them. make sure the humans are training the AI enough to know that if they are not available or accessible, that the AI can do a good enough job to wait for that authentic humanity to really rise and ultimately deliver on the impact. Good, good? Okay, should we see a little bit about what we're talking about? Do a little demo here?
Yes, please.
All right. So let's take 5 minutes and just quickly switch over to Skilly. Now, this is inside of skillbuilder.io. This is a tool that we were shaping with the Forbes Funds and GPNP that does a variety of things. So I'm not going to bore everybody with the product demo. We're just going to focus on the cool kind of AI dimensions today, but I want to contextualize you a little bit, right? One is that this all started because everything, it turns out, in social impact and nonprofit is about knowing what questions you're going to get asked and answering them in a really effective way, ideally quickly. And as it turns out, when we were doing a little anecdote, so Kit and I ran around, we talked to hundreds of organizations in the social impact sector, and it turns out that everybody knew in various places the questions they were going to get asked. But it also turned out that a lot of the questions from grants were hidden away in some PDF or Word doc, right? Or were sitting away in some Google Sheet or Excel file, or hidden inside of a response to an email or Slack or Microsoft Teams or a variety of things. And there just wasn't any simple way to aggregate questions that you get and the answers that are most compelling. And so what we've done then is we've started to build a tool where the first thing you can do with AI is you can come around and click the AI question generator. Now, what this does is, in this case, it'll look at the Forbes funds. So we're sending out our various crawler. It's going to come around and it's going to start to explore everything and anything that it can find on the Forbes fund. So you'll notice in just a few seconds, right, it went out and it read everything that it could about the Forbes fund sites. And in a more advanced model, if you put in different things like competitive sites or product specific sites, or you've answered any questions, it also looks at those kinds of sites. And it goes ahead and it looks at, topics like, let's say, membership or maybe coaching or a variety of things. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And now what it's doing is it's trying to generate all the questions it thinks you're going to get from funders or volunteers or staff or the community that you serve about this particular topic, right? So Em, let's do a quick sanity check here to make sure I'm not lying to everybody. And let's see if this is actually useful, because it's always fun to do a live demo in a live environment. So I went out and you can see up here that it's the membership category do we have. So Em, how often do you get asked, how do I join or renew my GPNP membership?
Probably 2 or 3 times a week, or just questions related to that. Yeah.
Okay, so pretty popular questions. That's a good one. Okay, let's go ahead and come down. Can non-members attend the weekly calls for community solutions like we're on today?
Weekly.
Sorry. Can non-members attend the weekly calls?
Yes, definitely weekly. I get
Okay,
that one.
perfect.
I mean, I had a couple emails this morning about it.
Wonderful. Okay, so the idea is these are the types of questions that we want to go ahead and just click on the plus button and go ahead and add it to Skill Builder. We can also see themes up here around coaching. So, hey, what is the process for matching with a coach or an executive director? What is the cost of coaching services at the Forbes Funds? Emily, what is the cost of coaching services at the Forbes Funds and GPNP?
There is a cost, but the Forbes Funds covers it. I think on our website, it usually says free. It's not free. We pay for the coach depending on their, level of, their tier for payment.
That's right. And so the idea is that's an important question because there's nuance. And so we come in here, we finalize, we see these couple of questions, we can see the ones we didn't add, and we click save. And now what we notice, right, is there's inherently my name down here because I just recorded this question. I have a little Skilly here because the wave is coming, and this is really what I loved about the earlier question about attribution and transparency is, hey, you'll notice that this question has been tagged, that it's been generated with AI, and that your logo in this case has also been tagged with Skilly AI, right? Now, if I want to come in here, this is where it gets fun, and then we'll hop to the AI after I've generated my questions. It's nice because this allows you to generate about 200 to 300 questions in about 20 minutes or so, and begins to help the AI start to help you actually answer all of these questions. So we're going to go over, if you didn't want to use the AI to answer the questions and manually answer them, I can go ahead and choose a video. I'm going to go ahead and allow my computer to ultimately come in and say hello to everyone here. I'm going to go ahead and hit start recording and say, Welcome, Community Solutions Call. I'm Adam, and this is how we do answers that inform our digital colleagues. And what you're noticing happening is in the background is the AI is real-time and near-time processing everything that is going on. And as we welcome Community Solutions Call, I'm Adam, and this is how we do answers that inform sharing my point of view in live. Does that make sense? Hopefully everybody could hear that. All right, wonderful. The Zoom gods have smiled upon us. So the idea is you could obviously upload images, videos, screen recordings, and the like to answer questions. Obviously Emily had a really good one. She can also weigh in on how confident and how differentiated she thinks that the answer is relative to someone else. Now, why this is important is that sometimes I'm going to get it wrong, kind of like I just did. And it's okay, and it's important to kind of give feedback to the AI because humans make mistakes too. So I can flag everything that's going on. I can make sure this is noticed as inaccurate or out of date. I can actually archive these various answers. And then as an admin, if I come in to kind of manage this and I accept my request to archive what's happening, you'll now notice that I have no answers on the cost of coaching here. So there's always manual ways to intervene, meaning human-led, not human in the loop, to shape the newest interesting information. And that allows me to come over to my Skilly. So first thing we might want to ask, Skilly, which can be externalized outside on your website or on LinkedIn. If you want to kind of train the model, which typically takes about 60 to 75 days, you can say things like, what is GPNP? If I can learn how to spell and type. And so what's happening now is the AI is looking at all of the video recordings, websites, knowledge, images. It's pretty much anything and everything that can happen. And it's doing its best to kind of respond with everything that is going on. And then obviously, as Emily continues to train this, which is what's called a teenage model, right? We'll continue to evolve stats, facts, and figures about everything that's going to happen. And you can either then click on individual prompts that the AI wants you to choose next. And this is something, again, that could be surfaced on your website or LinkedIn, or you can continuously type in things like, random questions. So if we want to know who Olivia is, we could come together. Oh, looks like it knows that Olivia is the Chief Operating Officer of the Forbes Funds and not Olivia Benson of the Special Victims Unit along the way. A commonly mistaken, famous clause. So the idea is that as we get more and more kind of into these dynamics, we have more and more opportunities to kind of interact with AI and the intelligence that is here along the way. You also have the ability to organize all of these answers in things like questions and flashcards, which allow you to train your staff along the way. You can also then generate FAQs or cards from these questions and answers that can be dynamically generated or pasted or embedded inside of any and all of your properties and resources like the landing pages of your website, or of course, like LinkedIn or social channels like TikTok or Facebook or anything in between. And so the idea is this is the mechanism, because people are always asking, well, how do I train my AI? How do I tell it what to do? This is the medium or the UI that we'll be working with in the advanced AI cohort to really advance how to better respond to RFPs, how to better train your AI to do inbound small dollar donor in conversations, which is really kind of the big point. How do you prioritize follow my socials versus sign up my newsletter versus, fill out my volunteer form? All of these kind of calls to actions fundamentally kind of bring us together. So that's what I wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of a taste on the kind of intersection of humans plus AI and the actual experience and interface that Forbes has been cultivating and incubating to bring its digital colleagues to life, with an idea on being its digital membership director, if not a digital development director, and kind of everything in between those 2 points. But we're also seeing a tremendous amount of these types of AI examples in just answering general questions about like membership benefits or signing up or allowing people to have a special landing page that's all about recruitment or a variety of other factors. And the nice part about AI is that like all of us will probably own that there's at least 50 to 100 questions that are not strategic, that if someone else could answer the first 1, 2, or 3 of them, and then have the AI schedule on my Calendly or share my email address after we've hit a certain qualification point, I think we'd all be a little bit happier along our journey. And so, it's not just the nonprofit and social impact sector that this happens with. 1 in 4 companies are already in the for-profit sector adopting and infusing AI because they're already burning out the existing amazing employees that they have and the staff that really gets the job done. And they're just frankly struggling to hire into both part-time and full-time jobs for a variety of reasons, not of which even a little bit is always on the employee side or the future employee side. A lot of it's on the employer's lack of ability to kind of change and understand how to bring scale. This is the video that we will share. I don't know if Emily, you want to share this in the chat now, but if you have 14 minutes of your life, we apologize for the length, but there's a lot to say about how we ethically developed the AI that we are using to honor the kind of voice and culture and tone of the organization. How we protected the proprietary data that's, nearly, in the case of GPNP, over 10 years old, in the case of Forbes Funds, 30 years old or 40 years old, right? Along the way. And then how do we actually use a variety of whatever the big, large language models are today? Those are things like Claude from Anthropic and Hugging Face from Facebook and OpenAI or Bard. But it might be Minstrel from Europe. It could be a variety of other models next year. And that's why we stay really fluid. So, the last question that, Kit and I and the rest of the Skill Builder team really want to ask you is, how can you maximize your impact with AI? And if you don't know the answer to that question, then this is the time to sign up for that cohort, right? We don't imply that you know everything and anything about what's going on. We don't imply that you have enough hours in the day to learn all this stuff. But, as part of your GPNP and your broader Forbes relationship, there's an opportunity here to not only explore in a safe space the idea of AI, but to see living, breathing examples of real enterprise grade AI living side by side with your human colleagues. So that was the premise, Em, of everything that I wanted to cover today. I know this is kind of going to be out there to everybody else. I know we're just running into the hour here. If you have any generalist questions, then we'd love to obviously have you email us. Our suggestion for generalists, like, what about AI? Can you share this? What are you seeing? Get me on your article email list. hello@skillbuilder.io is always there. If you want, part of one of the things that Forbes and GPNP has done is invested in a way for Kit to offer anyone and everyone that's in the GPNP or Forbes Fund a free workshop to just write down your top 20 or 30 funder questions or volunteer questions or program questions and the like, and kind of really get a version of this. And in exchange, kind of buy yourself kind of a free 30-day window, along the way to kind of do all this, but no pressure along any of those, fronts. Just wanted to offer that if you don't have your very own Kit or Adam hanging out in the kind of nerdville that we are every day and all day long around AI, that we at least wanted to offer some of that grace back for those of us who've done such a good job of educating us on what are kinds of problems that AI might be able to solve in the social impact sector.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Adam. I'm gonna go ahead and launch the poll real quick, and I do want to do this just while we have over 40 folks still on the call. Basically, for anybody who's not familiar with these calls every week, since I do see some new faces, we have a poll that we pull information on a weekly basis from our member organizations and individuals who are new to the Forbes Funds ecosystem to kind of do a litmus test on interest in these types of opportunities. But uniquely for this week, also interest in utilizing the strategic design in a box tool. And based on some of the questions that we were getting in the chat, there's definitely some interest there. And I did see, Adam, you responded to Rebecca about the code. Perfect. Okay. So while that's happening, I do want to invite a couple of updates from Fred Brown, and he's the president and CEO of the Forbes Funds. If there are any closing remarks or final thoughts for today, Fred, the floor is yours.
I apologize. I wasn't on early this morning. I was at the swearing in for the new city council members. I want to start off and thank everybody for riding with us for the past 41 years. I want to give a personal thank to Adam and Kit, who I've worked with for at least 10 years. And 10 years ago, Adam and I met when I was at the Homewood Children's Village, and he bought a vacant building in Homewood to start a technology center focused on kids at Westinghouse and people in the community. And I remember people wondering what his intent was. And I said to people, he seeks to educate and inform people who have been disadvantaged by systems, and we should take him at his word. 10 years later, we find ourselves at the precipice of providing some monumental offering to the world that allows us to procure a way that we ensure the integrity of people being supported by technology and not overran by technology. And so this opportunity that Adam and his team has put together for us in collaboration with us marks a shift in how we see our work. As he mentioned several times on the call, AI is not going to replace humans, but it's going to augment the way that they function and increase their effectiveness and efficiency, which those of you who know us know that that's a term we've been using for the last 6 years. Moreover, it's a theoretical framework that moves to the metaphysical framework for this model. And so I'm super excited about the learning models that Adam and his team have put together and the cross-sectoral framework by which this work is moving. I also want to thank James Doyle, who I met with several months ago now to talk about what is the role of education as we start to merge into this transformational process, given that Pittsburgh is recognized globally as a global city, but locally we still are struggling with the dichotomy between those thriving parts of the city and those surviving. If you take into account the 90 communities in Allegheny County, 43 are struggling academically, financially, and otherwise. And so when you think about how can AI change the trajectory of those communities, those organizations, and those people, it's a monumental opportunity. The other thing that we're working on with a group called UMI Score is data sovereignty. And so as we pursue this notion of AI, we've concurrently for the past 3 years been working with PJ and his team to ensure that as we look to extrapolate data, that we honor people and we don't take advantage of that extrapolation process, that there's shared ownership and in some ways some remuneration for those communities who share data. And so we are in this unique space where we're playing the conscience of technology in a meaningful way, not to just do good, but to do good in a sense that increases organizations' ability to pivot and shift and rapidly prototype. Last year, we launched something called the Transformational Leadership Cohort, and it really was built to look at emerging leaders coming into the sector and equipping them with skills that allow them to be more agile and iterative, given that we believe that the kind of leadership that's required for us to get out of the current rut we're in is transformational leaders. And so Adam's work lays the foundation for us to move away from transactional frameworks to transformational ones. And in the middle, this notion of rapid prototyping becomes very critical. Rapid prototyping is a tool that we've been using the past year to really allow us to look at making decisions in 30-day increments. That 30, 60, and 90-day framework gives us the time to test the validity of an idea, prove its effectiveness, and roll it out. AI will enhance our ability to do that exponentially while reducing the cost. The other thing that our team gets bombarded with, and Adam spoke to this earlier, is requests that could be met by a different systems response and not a human response. Given that for me, I don't know what my email count is on a daily basis, probably 150 or more. If there was a tool that could mitigate those emails that went directly to a call and response question that is in the email that is being triggered by Skilly to respond to, it then minimizes the need for people to talk to me, which is often, and I say it's not a waste of time, but because I don't think talking to me is a waste of time, but it's not the best use of people's time because some of the answers to questions don't revolve around me. They revolve around the team. They revolve around their ability to respond and advise you on what they're working on and its availability for partnership, access, and otherwise, which I know a general sense of, but not the specificity. And so this tool that we're talking about is a game changer. And this workshop that you've been invited into is a paradigm shift for your organization as well as your board. The kind of regulations and guidelines that are being impacted on a global level and with the US government requires, in my opinion, the nonprofit sector to raise its hand and say, this is good for this reason, and this is the things we're concerned about for these reasons. That cannot be a spurious relationship. It needs to have an XY correlation. What is the data saying? What is our experience, and what is the tangible, measurable outcome? And so for those reasons, I would invite you to strongly consider being a part of this. I want to again thank Adam and his team and our team for putting in the work to get Skilly started. I talked to Adam a couple days ago and I said, we gave birth to this baby. What month is it in? And he said, it's like in its 8th month. So that means it's crawling, right? And because it's generative AI, it's going to keep evolving. It's going to keep pushing out things. I think the other thing when you saw, if you didn't see the 14-minute video, this tool also allows an organization to scan documents that allows it to publish articles, look at grant opportunities, identify donors. And so when you start thinking about its application is uniquely suited for nonprofits to increase their effectiveness and efficiency across a myriad of domains within this ecosystem. And so lastly, I would say this 6th pivot that we're in as an institution is around building regenerative frameworks. And if you remember, our work in our 3rd pivot was with Nora Bateson out of Sweden with the International Basin Institute. And this began at the beginning of COVID. And we started something with Nora around this notion of people needing people. And so when Adam talks about the human element to this, we're really asking human beings to be authentic about their challenges and opportunities and the things that they might be concerned about regarding AI, so that we can have testimony and data to manifest that gives us real proof of concept. And so this is not a new, I would say it's not a new car, right? There's millions of cars out there. There's a unique vehicle here that has a chance to have the DNA of the nonprofit sector embedded in it in a way that contextualizes its output in a way that currently doesn't exist with ChatGPT and other offerings, because I believe in my research and looking at those tools, there's a lack of cultural nuance across those entire ecosystems. And so at another level, this project weaves in those cultural nuances in a way that raises the level of the output of Skilly to really personify the essence of well-being of our sector and organization. So thank you for listening. I thought that this is a very worthwhile project, or we wouldn't have invested in it. And I have to say in closing, Adam is a dear friend. I appreciate Kit and his commitment to constantly pursuing ways that the nonprofit sector can benefit from technology. This is not a first stab. It's been a 10-year journey, at least with me. I don't know beyond that, but I can speak for the last 10 years. And both men and their teams have made themselves available to us and other people in the community. They've gone wherever they had to go, and they've, out of their own pocket, paid for ways to inform and educate people about the benefit of such things. And so when we think about people who are real stakeholders, change agents, paradigm shifters, we're on the Zoom call with those kind of people. So I definitely wanted to give them their just dues and honor them as well. So thank you.
Thank you so
Just want
much.
to say, I just want to say thanks again. That was very, very nice and unexpected, but it was a really nice way to kind of wrap a call. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for sharing the time. You know, I mean, this was only possible because we spent, I don't know if it was 10, but at least 5 years starting to think about like what needed to change and then how it could change, and then kind of waiting patiently for the moment to be upon us where it was cost effective to change. So just exciting for what 24 will bring.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Fred. I'm going to wrap up the call then. Just as a heads up, because of MLK Day, we do not have a call next Monday, but the following Monday on the 22nd, Craig Mayer, who was one of our December presenters last year, really opened the door for some mental health supports and sent a survey around. I'll send that out again for individuals who participated this morning, basically so he could kind of curate a presentation addressing the top mental health needs for nonprofit professionals as kind of an opening, January presentation this year. So that will be a follow-up email that goes out today or first thing tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining our first call of the year. Adam, I think it was a huge success. I think at our peak, we had 48 folks on, which is a significant jump from some of our calls last year. So thank you for joining and kicking off the year with us. And I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the time. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Sending you all the positive vibes of 24. Let's get going.